What if one of humanity's most ancient stories holds the key to understanding why we speak thousands of different languages? The Tower of Babel presents us with a divine intervention that scattered tongues across the earth. But modern linguistics suggests natural evolution and geographic isolation created our linguistic diversity. Can both truths coexist in ways that transcend our understanding? From the very beginning, God established communication as fundamental to creation itself. And God said, "Let there be light," the first recorded divine speech that brought forth existence through the power of words. Language wasn't an afterthought in creation. It was the very mechanism through which reality was spoken into being. When God created Adam, he immediately engaged in conversation, giving him the authority to name every living creature. This wasn't merely a practical task. It was the establishment of human language as a reflection of divine communication. The Hebrew word, dabar, means both word and thing, suggesting that in God's design, language and reality are intrinsically connected. The Tower of Babel represents humanity's first unified linguistic achievement after the flood. Genesis tells us that the whole world had one language and a common speech. This unity of language enabled unprecedented cooperation and technological advancement. They could conceive and execute the construction of a tower reaching toward heaven, a feat of ancient engineering that required sophisticated communication and coordination. But here's where science intersects with scripture in fascinating ways. Modern neurolinguistics reveals that human brains are uniquely wired for language acquisition and processing. The Broca's and Wernicke's areas in our brains are specifically designed for speech production and comprehension. This isn't evolutionary accident, it's divine architecture. God embedded the capacity for complex communication directly into our neural framework, making language an inherent part of human consciousness. The scientific study of language universals, common features found in all human languages, supports the biblical account of an original unified language. Despite the incredible diversity of world languages, they share fundamental structures. All languages have nouns and verbs. All can express past and future concepts, and all follow similar patterns of grammatical complexity. These universals suggest a common linguistic origin, just as Babel describes. Even the most isolated human communities develop complex languages within generations, a phenomenon that baffles evolutionary linguists but aligns perfectly with the idea that language capacity was divinely implanted. The Tower of Babel wasn't just about building materials and mortar. It was about the power of unified human communication under divine design, and God's sovereign decision to redirect that unity for his greater purposes. The biblical account of Babel provides specific examples of divine intervention in human linguistic development. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other, God declared. This wasn't destruction. It was divine redirection through supernatural linguistics. Archaeological evidence from ancient Mesopotamia reveals that the region of Babel, modern-day Iraq, was indeed a center of linguistic diversity in the ancient world. The Code of Hammurabi, cuneiform tablets, and other artifacts show multiple languages coexisting in the same geographic area, supporting the biblical timeline of linguistic division. But here's where science offers intriguing parallels to the miraculous. Social linguists have documented rapid language change in crisis situations. When communities are suddenly separated or face dramatic social upheaval, languages can diverge remarkably quickly. The Pidgin and Creole formation process shows how new languages can emerge within a single generation when groups with different languages are forced to communicate. Consider the documented case of Nicaraguan Sign Language, which emerged spontaneously when deaf children were brought together in schools in the 1980s. Within one generation, they created a completely new, complex language system. This demonstrates that humans possess an almost supernatural capacity for rapid language genesis, exactly what would be required for the post-Babel linguistic explosion. The biblical account describes confusion of language leading to geographical dispersion. Modern genetics supports this pattern through the study of human migration routes and linguistic families. The distribution of language families across continents follows migration patterns that align with the biblical narrative of people groups spreading from a central location in the Middle East. Neuroplasticity research reveals that human brains can rewire themselves for new languages throughout life, but children possess an almost miraculous capacity for multiple language acquisition. At Babel, if God confused the languages, the adults would struggle, but children would adapt rapidly, creating stable linguistic communities within a generation. Even more fascinating is the phenomenon of xenoglossia, documented cases of people spontaneously speaking languages they then never learned. While rare and controversial, these cases suggest that language capacity might operate beyond normal cognitive boundaries, hinting at supernatural dimensions of human communication that science is only beginning to explore. The Tower of Babel demonstrates that God's intervention in human affairs can work through mechanisms that appear natural to us, but are ultimately supernatural in their precision, timing, and scope. The confusion of languages was unchaotic. It was a perfectly orchestrated divine symphony that achieved God's purposes while respecting human linguistic capacity. God's intervention at Babel operated through principles that modern linguistics is beginning to understand, yet which transcend purely naturalistic explanations. The divine confusion of languages followed patterns that reflect deeper laws of communication and cognition that God embedded in creation itself. Language drift and dialectal variation occur naturally over time and distance. But the Babel event compressed what normally takes centuries into an instantaneous transformation. Historical linguistics shows us that languages naturally diverge when populations separate, just as Latin evolved into Spanish, French, and Italian over centuries. But at Babel, this process was supernaturally accelerated and directed. The concept of critical period hypothesis in linguistics suggests there's an optimal window for language acquisition, typically ending around puberty. If God confused the languages of Babel, he would have accounted for this neural reality. Children would rapidly acquire the new linguistic patterns, while adults would struggle, creating generational linguistic boundaries that would ensure permanent language separation. Chomsky's universal grammar theory proposes that all humans share an innate language faculty, a biological endowment that allows us to acquire any human language. This faculty includes principles and parameters that govern all possible human languages. If this is true, then God's confusion of languages at Babel worked within these divine parameters, creating linguistically possible but distinct language systems instantaneously. Modern cognitive science reveals that language and thought are interconnected through complex neural networks. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that language structure influences perception and thinking patterns. When God confused the languages of Babel, he wasn't just changing vocabulary and grammar. He was reshaping cognitive patterns and worldviews, ensuring that the unified rebellion could not easily reunite. Genetic studies of language disorders reveal specific genes associated with language capacity, such as FOXP2. These genes regulate the development of brain circuits crucial for speech and language. The Tower of Babel event could have involved divine manipulation of genetic expression affecting language development, working through natural mechanisms while achieving supernatural results. The science of psycholinguistics shows us that bilingual individuals actually think differently in different languages, accessing different memory networks and emotional associations. If the people of Babel suddenly found themselves thinking in different linguistic frameworks, their entire psychological and social reality would shift, making unity impossible without divine intervention to reverse the process. Information theory provides another lens for understanding Babel. Human languages contain optimal levels of redundancy and information density for effective communication. The confused languages would need to maintain these optimal characteristics while being mutually incomprehensible, a feat requiring perfect calibration of linguistic complexity that only divine intelligence could achieve instantaneously. Let us examine the Tower of Babel through the specific lens of how such rapid linguistic diversification could occur while maintaining the sophisticated language structures we observe today. The biblical account provides us with a unique case study in supernatural linguistics that challenges purely naturalistic models of language origin and development. Historical linguists trace language families back through comparative reconstruction, identifying proto-languages from which modern languages descended. The Indo-European family, for instance, traces back to a hypothetical Proto-Indo-European spoken thousands of years ago. But the Babel account suggests all these families diverged from a single original language much more recently and dramatically than gradual evolution would allow. Consider the complexity problem. Human languages are incredibly sophisticated systems with intricate grammars, vast vocabularies, and subtle pragmatic rules. For new languages to emerge instantly at Babel while maintaining this complexity, they would need to be created by an intelligence that understands the deepest principles of human communication, principles that linguists are still discovering. The mutual intelligibility factor presents another fascinating aspect. For the confusion to achieve its purpose, the new languages had to be sufficiently different to prevent communication, but not so alien as to be unlearnable by human minds. This required perfect calibration. Languages different enough to divide, but similar enough to be cognitively accessible to human language faculties. Sociolinguistic research shows that language change is typically gradual and influenced by social prestige, group identity, and communication needs. The Babel event inverted these normal processes, creating instant linguistic boundaries that became markers of group identity and geographic distribution. This supernatural intervention worked through natural human tendencies while achieving outcomes impossible through normal social processes. Modern attempts to create artificial languages, like Esperanto, demonstrate how difficult it is to design languages that feel natural to human speakers. Even carefully crafted constructed languages lack the organic complexity and cultural embedding that characterizes natural languages. The Babel languages would have needed to emerge with full cultural and psychological integration, a feat requiring intimate knowledge of human cognition and social dynamics. Computational linguistics reveals that natural languages exhibit mathematical properties like power law, distributions, and optimal information structure. For the confused languages of Babel to function effectively, they would need to maintain these mathematical properties while being mutually unintelligible. This represents a design challenge that pushes beyond what naturalistic processes could achieve without divine orchestration. The children of Babel would have been crucial to establishing the new linguistic communities. Developmental psycholinguistics shows that children acquire languages through complex neural processes that fine-tune grammatical parameters based on input. If God confused the languages, the children's brains would need to receive consistent input in the new languages immediately, requiring supernatural coordination of linguistic production across entire communities simultaneously. The principles demonstrated at Babel continue to manifest in contemporary linguistic phenomena that challenge purely naturalistic explanations, while revealing God's ongoing involvement in human communication. Modern technology and globalization have created new contexts where supernatural elements of language emerge in ways that echo the Tower of Babel. The Internet age has created unprecedented opportunities for instant global communication, ironically reversing the scattering effect of Babel. Yet even with translation technology advancing rapidly, true cross-cultural communication remains challenging, suggesting that the linguistic divisions established at Babel operate at deeper levels than mere vocabulary and grammar, levels that touch the soul and spirit of human communities. Pentecostal phenomena throughout church history provide documented cases of xenoglossia and interpretation of tongues that parallel the Babel event in reverse. When the Holy Spirit enabled disciples to speak in various languages at Pentecost, it demonstrated God's power to transcend linguistic barriers through supernatural means. Modern charismatic movements continue to report similar experiences, suggesting that divine intervention in human language remains active. The emergence of sign languages in deaf communities worldwide demonstrates the supernatural capacity humans possess for creating complex linguistic systems spontaneously. Deaf children exposed to no sign language will create their own gestural communication systems that develop linguistic complexity within generations. This mirrors what must have occurred at Babel, the rapid establishment of new language systems through divinely enhanced human linguistic capacity. Modern neuroscience reveals that multilingual individuals possess different neural networks for different languages, with some bilinguals reporting distinct personality traits and emotional responses in different languages. This suggests that language affects identity at neurological levels, supporting the biblical view that the confusion of languages at Babel was designed to create distinct cultural and psychological communities, not just communication barriers. Artificial intelligence and machine translation, despite tremendous advances, still struggle with the nuances of human communication, context, emotion, cultural references, and spiritual dimensions that resist algorithmic analysis. This limitation points to transcendent aspects of human language that connect to our nature as beings created in God's image, aspects that were preserved and diversified at Babel. The global resurgence of indigenous languages and cultural identity movements reflects deep human needs for linguistic community that go beyond mere communication efficiency. Despite globalizing forces, people groups maintain fierce attachment to their ancestral languages, suggesting that linguistic diversity serves divine purposes in human flourishing that transcend practical considerations. Contemporary sociolinguists document rapid language change in urban environments where multiple languages interact. New varieties emerge within generations through processes that linguists struggle to predict or fully explain. These modern linguistic dynamics demonstrate that language change can be far more rapid and mysterious than traditional models suggest, lending credibility to the supernatural speed of linguistic diversification described at Babel. As we reach the limits of linguistic science, we encounter the profound mystery of how human language connects to divine communication in ways that transcend our analytical capabilities. The Tower of Babel reveals aspects of God's nature and purposes that push beyond what human investigation can fully comprehend, reminding us that divine actions operate in dimensions beyond scientific measurement. The relationship between language and consciousness remains one of science's greatest mysteries. We know that language shapes thought and that thought influences language, but the exact mechanisms remain elusive. This mystery deepens when we consider that human language capacity appears to be qualitatively different from animal communication systems, a gap that suggests divine intervention in human cognitive evolution. Quantum mechanics has revealed that reality itself operates according to principles that defy intuitive understanding. If the physical universe functions through quantum entanglement and superposition, how much more might divine communication operate through principles that transcend our current scientific paradigms? The confusion of languages at Babel might have involved quantum-level interventions in neural networks and genetic expression that achieved macroscopic linguistic effects. The fine-tuning of universal constants that makes life possible extends to the fine-tuning of human cognitive architecture that makes language possible. The precise configuration of brain structures, genetic codes, and developmental programs required for language acquisition suggests intentional design at levels of complexity that point beyond naturalistic explanations toward divine intelligence. Modern information theory reveals that human languages contain optimal levels of information density and error correction that enable robust communication across noisy channels. This optimization suggests that language design involves principles of information theory that were undiscovered by humans until the 20th century, yet were embedded in human linguistic capacity from the beginning. The emergence of consciousness itself remains scientifically inexplicable. The hard problem of consciousness that resists materialistic reduction. If consciousness cannot be explained through physical processes alone, then language, which is intimately connected to consciousness, must also involve non-material dimensions that connect to our spiritual nature as image-bearers of God. Prayer and divine revelation demonstrate that human language can serve as a medium for communication between finite and infinite consciousness. When humans commune with God through language, we participate in a form of communication that transcends the normal boundaries of linguistic analysis. The Tower of Babel event reminds us that God's relationship to human language operates at levels of sovereignty and creativity that exceed our comprehension. The ultimate mystery is that the God who confused languages at Babel is the same God who promises that in the eschatological future, linguistic barriers will be overcome as people from every tribe, tongue, and nation worship together in unity. This suggests that linguistic diversity serves temporary purposes in God's plan, while ultimate communication and communion with God transcends the limitations of any human language system. The Tower of Babel stands as a testament to the complex relationship between divine sovereignty and human understanding. While linguistics offers fascinating insights into language diversity and development, it ultimately points beyond itself to mysteries of consciousness, communication, and divine purpose that transcend scientific explanation. Can we hold both scientific inquiry and divine mystery in creative tension, recognizing that God's ways surpass our understanding while working through the natural laws He established? Perhaps the greatest miracle isn't choosing between linguistics and legend, but discovering how both can coexist in the magnificent complexity of divine truth.